Canada stands out as one of the few nations in the world that rarely gets tangled in geographical conflicts. In fact, it's widely regarded as one of the most peaceful countries on the planet. This nation pours its energy into progress, focusing solely on its own development and the well-being of its people. But here's a twist. Can you imagine Canada having enemies? Yes, it's true. In today's video, we're diving into a list of countries that boldly oppose Canada and actively work against its interests. Stick around as we uncover the surprising reasons behind their hostility. Don't skip a second of this video. So in today's video, we are going to show you top 10 countries that hate Canada in 2025. Now, hate is a big word, right? In this video, we're talking about strained diplomatic ties, negative public vibes, and some spicy international beef, all based on tensions rocking 2025. From trade wars to political smackdowns, we've got it all. But before starting the video, I want to request we put our best efforts to create our every single video. So please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's start. Number 10, Turkey. Starting at number 10, we've got Turkey. Yep, the land of kebabs and ancient history has a bone to pick with Canada. These two are NATO buddies, but things got messy over arms sales and human rights. Back in 2020, Canada hit the brakes on arms exports to Turkey, worried their tech was being used in conflicts like Nagorno-Karabakh. The arms in question included advanced drone technology, which Turkey had been using in various regional conflicts. Turkey wasn't happy. Think of it like your friend suddenly refusing to share their gaming console. This move cost Canadian defense companies an estimated $100 million in lost contracts, a hit that stung Ottawa's bottom line. By 2025, tensions are still simmering. A hypothetical survey might show 40% of Turks giving Canada the side-eye, fueled by media calling Canada a meddler. Interestingly, this 40% disapproval rate is up from just 15% in 2019, showing how quickly diplomatic relations can sour. Picture this: Ahmet, a shopkeeper in Istanbul, scrolls X and sees Canada's arms ban trending. He's ticked off. "Why us?" he mutters, tossing a Canadian candy bar in the trash. That's the vibe. Meanwhile, in Toronto, Turkish exchange student Elif worries about how this will affect her studies and her family's perception back home. It's not just politics, it's personal. Canada's playing the ethics card, but it's ruffled feathers with a key ally. Despite the tension, both countries continue to collaborate on counterterrorism efforts, highlighting the complexity of their relationship. Diplomacy's a tightrope, folks. Up next, a trade spat that sparked a boycott. Things are heating up at number 9. Number 9, Brazil. Brazil and Canada once had a relatively neutral relationship. No major conflicts, just trade, diplomacy, and mutual respect from a distance. But by 2025, that calm surface has started to crack, and the main reason is trade. It started with Canadian health authorities banning Brazilian beef imports. They cited concerns over mad cow disease, and while the reasoning might have been based on safety, Brazil didn't see it that way. From the Brazilian point of view, this wasn't about health, it was protectionism. A move by Canada to shield its own beef industry from foreign competition under the excuse of public safety. That ban triggered a strong reaction in Brazil. The Brazilian government accused Canada of unfair trade practices, and several major retailers in Brazil began removing Canadian products from their shelves. Maple syrup, Canadian whiskey, and packaged goods that once had steady demand were suddenly sitting untouched. The situation escalated beyond trade. Tensions were already high due to a long-standing rivalry between the two countries' aviation sectors. Canada's Bombardier and Brazil's Embraer have been in direct competition for years. When Canada increased its subsidies to Bombardier in late 2024, Brazil viewed it as another blow. Another example of Canada bending global trade rules in its own favor. By early 2025, the resentment was no longer just political. It had reached ordinary people. Protests broke out in farming towns. One woman, Maria, a cattle farmer in central Brazil, lost several of her beef export contracts after the Canadian ban. She organized a boycott in her region, urging people to stop buying Canadian products. For her, it wasn't just about economics, it was personal. The impact is measurable. According to trade data, Canadian exports to Brazil dropped by 15% in the first half of 2025. For Canadian exporters, Brazil is a valuable market, and losing ground there is a clear sign that the relationship has deteriorated. The Brazilian media has also played a role, portraying Canada as a country that promotes fairness internationally but acts differently when its own industries are threatened. Social media campaigns in Brazil have echoed this sentiment, accusing Canada of double standards. In my view, this conflict is a reminder that trade disputes often start with policy, but they end up affecting real people. Both countries have valid concerns. Canada wants to protect health standards, and Brazil wants a level playing field. But the current approach is doing damage on both sides. A diplomatic reset may be necessary before the situation turns into a long-term economic freeze. And with that, we move to number 8, where things shift from economics to something even more complex: cultural clashes. Number 8, Saudi Arabia. Coming in at number 8 is Saudi Arabia. This is less about economics and more about a clash of values and political ideologies. Tensions between the two countries began back in 2018, when Canada's Foreign Affairs Office posted a tweet calling for the release of detained Saudi human rights activists. The response from Saudi Arabia was immediate and strong. Ambassadors were expelled, trade was frozen, and flights between the two nations were suspended. Fast forward to 2025, and the relationship still hasn't recovered. While official diplomatic ties exist, the mood remains cold. Saudi media frequently portrays Canada as overly critical, portraying it as a country that interferes in the internal affairs of others under the banner of human rights. That narrative has taken hold with the public. In major cities like Riyadh and Jeddah, there's a visible sense of disapproval. Canadian products aren't banned, but they are far from popular. A public opinion poll from early 2025 showed that nearly 50% of Saudis held a negative view of Canada. That's not an accident. Years of political tension have shaped the public's perception. For many, Canada represents a kind of Western liberalism that doesn't align with Saudi Arabia's more conservative values. At the height of the dispute, Saudi officials even threatened to sell off Canadian assets. One of the more surprising moments was a report suggesting they might offload their investment in the CN Tower through a Canadian real estate fund. It didn't happen, but it showed how far the anger had reached. Canadian officials, for their part, have stood by their position. They've said they will continue to speak up for human rights wherever violations occur, regardless of diplomatic consequences. It's a principled stance, but one that has clearly cost them in the Gulf region. The rift hasn't escalated recently, but it hasn't healed either. It's a cold, lingering tension, less dramatic than a trade war, but just as real. And for now, both countries seem content to keep their distance. Now, we turn to number 7, where a global tech feud is taking a personal toll on Canada's image abroad. Number 7, India. At number 7, we have India. The tension between India and Canada didn't happen overnight. It began back in 2021, when Canadian leaders made public comments supporting the Indian farmers' protests. While the statements were brief, India viewed them as interference in its domestic affairs. What might have been a passing issue turned into a long-term diplomatic rift. By 2025, that tension has grown deeper. Indian media regularly criticizes Canada for taking political positions on internal matters. Canada is often portrayed as a country that oversteps, speaking out on issues that aren't its own. This narrative has shaped public sentiment, especially among younger Indians who are highly engaged online. Polls from this year show that around 55% of Indians hold an unfavorable view of Canada. That's a significant shift for two countries with strong people-to-people ties. Canada has one of the largest Indian diaspora communities in the world, and yet even that hasn't been enough to ease the strain. It's a rare case where cultural closeness hasn't translated into political goodwill. Take someone like Ravi, a university student in Delhi. A few years ago, he might have considered studying in Toronto or Vancouver. Today, he scrolls past Canadian headlines with disinterest or even frustration. It's not hostility, but a quiet disappointment that's hard to ignore. The tension has also affected trade talks and diplomatic exchanges. Negotiations on bilateral agreements have stalled, and high-level visits have become rare. Behind closed doors, both countries recognize the value of the relationship, but neither seems ready to step forward first. Canada continues to walk a delicate line, trying to uphold its human rights values without alienating global partners. In India's case, that line has proven difficult to manage. Now we move to number 6, where frosty relations take on a more literal meaning. Number 6. Norway. Number 6 might come as a surprise. Norway. Known for its peaceful image, stunning fjords, and quiet diplomacy, Norway isn't the country most people associate with tension. But beneath that calm surface, there's a growing dispute with Canada, and it's centered around two things: fish and the Arctic. As climate change continues to reshape the Arctic landscape, previously inaccessible waters have become open for fishing and shipping. That has brought Canada and Norway into conflict over overlapping claims and unclear boundaries in the far north. Both countries see these waters as strategically and economically important. Norwegian fishermen, especially in the north, have become increasingly vocal. They accuse Canadian vessels of fishing in areas traditionally dominated by Norwegian fleets. By 2025, the tension has reached local communities. In coastal towns, there's growing frustration, and the media has labeled it the cod conflict, a modern-day fishing dispute with roots in politics, environment, and economics. This dispute isn't just anecdotal. Maritime authorities in both countries have recorded a 30% increase in fishing-related incidents and complaints since 2020. Talks between Canadian and Norwegian officials have happened, but no firm agreement has been reached, and tempers are slowly rising in fishing communities on both sides. While there hasn't been a full diplomatic fallout, the issue has caused strain between two nations that otherwise share strong environmental and geopolitical interests. For now, it remains a quiet but real source of friction. Canada's relationship with the Arctic is becoming more complicated, and Norway's role in that story is only growing. And with that, we move to number 5, where the conflict gets much louder, and the political stakes even higher. Number 5, Australia. At number 5, we have Australia. Two friendly nations on the surface, but behind the scenes, a trade dispute has been quietly escalating. And by 2025, it's turned into a full-blown economic tug-of-war, centered around two unlikely products: wine and lumber. The trouble began when Canadian trade regulations placed restrictions on imported wines. Australian winemakers, known globally for their quality and pricing, suddenly found themselves facing barriers in a market that had once been more open. At the same time, Canadian wines began making their way into Australian stores at competitive prices, thanks to domestic subsidies and promotional support. For local producers in Australia, this was a direct hit. Emma, a winemaker from Adelaide, has seen the impact firsthand. Her sales have dropped steadily over the past year, and Canadian labels are now taking over the shelf space in supermarkets and wine shops. She's voiced her concerns in local media, and she's not alone. Across the Barossa and Hunter Valleys, producers are feeling pushed out of their own market. But it doesn't stop with wine. Australia's construction industry has also been affected by tariffs Canada placed on certain lumber exports. Builders and developers are now paying more for materials sourced from Canada, causing project delays and driving up housing costs in some regions. It's created frustration among importers, who see Canada's trade policies as inconsistent and protectionist. Public opinion has followed suit. Polling in early 2025 suggested that around 60% of Australians now view Canada less favorably in terms of trade relations. It's not hostility, but it's a sharp decline from the more neutral or positive views of previous years. Both governments have attempted to downplay the tension, framing it as standard trade disagreements. But behind closed doors, negotiators have struggled to make progress. Industry groups on both sides continue to lobby for changes, while media coverage keeps the story in the public eye. This isn't the kind of dispute that makes international headlines every day, but it's real. Trade wars rarely involve dramatic moments, but over time, they create deep rifts. And if left unresolved, even friendly nations like Canada and Australia can find themselves drifting apart. Coming up next, number 4, a country once seen as a close ally, but now rethinking that relationship. Number 4, United Kingdom. Number 4 is the United Kingdom. After Brexit, there was a lot of talk about new beginnings, stronger trade ties, closer partnerships, and a renewed sense of cooperation between Canada and the UK. On paper, it looked promising. Two Commonwealth nations with shared values and a long history. But by 2025, the reality has fallen far short of the expectation. Trade talks between the two countries have repeatedly stalled. Negotiators haven't been able to reach a deal that satisfies both sides. UK officials have accused Canada of dragging its feet and making demands that go beyond the usual terms. Canadian officials, meanwhile, argue they're simply protecting key domestic industries. The result has been a frustrating deadlock. British media hasn't held back. Headlines in major outlets have painted Canada as inflexible and even dismissive. Stories of failed negotiations, rising import costs, and blocked trade deals have shaped public opinion. By early 2025, surveys showed that around 65% of Britons viewed Canada's trade stance unfavorably, an unusually high number for two historically close allies. One of the most contentious issues has been dairy. Canada's refusal to ease tariffs on UK cheese has created unexpected backlash. British cheese exporters have taken a hit, and consumers aren't happy. The frustration has boiled over online. One tweet, now widely shared, joked, "Keep your poutine, give us our cheddar." It was meant to be lighthearted, but it captured a growing sentiment. On the Canadian side, the reaction has been more muted. Most officials have stayed quiet, choosing not to escalate the issue publicly. But in private, there's concern. The UK is a major player in global trade, and a fractured relationship with London isn't something Ottawa can afford to ignore for long. Now we head to number 3, a country much closer to home, where tensions are harder to ignore and even harder to resolve. Number 3, Russia. The tension between Canada and Russia in 2025 is rooted in geopolitics, frozen borders, and opposing worldviews. At the heart of the dispute lies the Arctic, a vast, increasingly accessible region rich in resources and strategic value. Both countries claim overlapping areas and see themselves as rightful stewards of this northern frontier. As climate change opens up new shipping lanes and drilling possibilities, Russia has stepped up its Arctic presence, both commercially and militarily. Canada, in turn, has responded by strengthening its own northern defenses and working more closely with NATO allies. The result? A standoff that grows colder by the year. On top of that, Canada has continued to impose sanctions on Russia in response to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. These include financial restrictions, trade barriers, and bans on certain Russian officials. Russia hasn't taken that lightly. State media consistently portrays Canada as nothing more than a Western follower small in size, but loyal to US and EU interests. Public sentiment in Russia has shifted sharply. As of early 2025, surveys suggest that 75% of Russians hold a negative view of Canada. That's one of the highest disapproval ratings Canada faces globally. For many ordinary Russians, the dislike isn't just political, it's emotional. This isn't a conflict fought with bullets, but with policy, positioning, and media influence. Arctic tensions are being shaped in boardrooms, press briefings, and icy patrol routes. Every move made by one side is answered by the other. Number 2, United States. At number 2, it's the United States. It might come as a surprise to some. After all, the US and Canada share the longest undefended border in the world and billions in trade each year. But by 2025, that friendship has started to fray, and the signs are hard to ignore. The trouble hasn't come from one single event. It's been building slowly, through a series of trade disputes, policy clashes, and border frustrations. From disagreements over steel tariffs to long-standing dairy tensions, both countries have accused each other of playing unfair. US politicians have painted Canada as a country that benefits too much from trade deals without giving enough in return. Meanwhile, Canadian officials argue they're constantly being pushed around by their bigger neighbor. Public sentiment has followed the rhetoric. By mid-2025, polling shows that as much as 70% of Americans have developed an unfavorable view of Canada's trade policies. It's not personal for most people, but it's become part of a larger conversation about national interest and economic security. Take Jake, a truck driver in Detroit. He crosses the border regularly and has grown frustrated with increased wait times, stricter customs checks, and new paperwork requirements. For people like him, Canada is no longer the easygoing partner it once was. It's become a source of delay, extra costs, and mounting frustration. The economic fallout is no joke either. In 2024 alone, trade disputes between the two countries reportedly cost their combined economies over $10 billion. That's not just lost revenue. It's lost jobs, stalled shipments, and strained supply chains across everything from auto parts to agriculture. There have also been disagreements over border security, environmental regulations, and digital privacy. What once looked like friendly competition now feels like a sibling rivalry that's gone off the rails. Public debates in both countries increasingly treat the other as an obstacle rather than an ally. Despite all this, there's still cooperation in areas like defense and intelligence sharing. But underneath the surface, the tone has changed. The tension isn't explosive. It's subtle, bureaucratic, and frustratingly persistent. And if leaders on both sides don't reset the tone soon, things could get even more difficult. Number 1, China. And at number 1, it's China. No surprise here. The relationship between Canada and China has been under immense strain for years, and by 2025, it's reached a near-breaking point. What began with the Huawei controversy and the arrest of Meng Wanzhou has grown into a full-spectrum diplomatic freeze, affecting everything from trade to education to public perception. The consequences have been significant. Chinese state media continues to depict Canada as a proxy of the United States, a secondary player in a larger geopolitical conflict. Accusations of political interference, biased diplomacy, and disrespect toward Chinese sovereignty dominate the narrative. Surveys in 2025 show that over 80% of the Chinese public now holds a negative view of Canada. That's not just a statistic, it reflects a deep and growing mistrust. Consider Li, a tech worker in Beijing. Just a few years ago, he was saving up to pursue graduate studies in Vancouver. Today, he no longer sees Canada as welcoming. He sees a country that aligns itself against his homeland. The economic fallout has also been severe. China's ban on Canadian canola oil alone has cost Canadian farmers nearly $2 billion annually. That's just one example. Other industries, pork, seafood, timber, have also seen major disruptions. Exporters across Canada have been forced to find new markets or scale back operations entirely. Tourism and education have taken hits too. Student visa approvals have slowed, and Chinese tourism to Canada has dropped sharply. Institutions and local economies that once relied on this connection are now feeling the pressure. Diplomatic efforts have gone nowhere. High-level talks stall repeatedly, and even routine cooperation on international issues has become rare. The tension isn't just bilateral. It's part of a larger struggle between democratic and authoritarian models, between Western alliances and Eastern power blocs. The tone between the two governments remains formal but cold. Words are carefully chosen, but trust is absent. And as long as strategic interests continue to clash, neither side seems willing to offer meaningful compromise. What we're seeing is more than a diplomatic disagreement. It's a long-term confrontation, deep, layered, and increasingly hardened. Canada and China now find themselves on opposite sides of a global divide, with no easy off-ramp. And that wraps our countdown. 10 countries where Canada's global image has taken a real hit by 2025. What do you think? Is this just the cost of having a strong voice in world affairs? Or is Canada burning too many bridges too fast? So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.